What if I told you there's a reason you can dream bigger than most people you know, yet still find yourself trapped by the same old habits, the same lazy Sundays, the same cycle of starting and stopping? What if I promised you that if you stay with me through all 5 parts of this video, you'll finally get the one thing no self-help book or viral motivation video ever gave you? The map out of the cycle, the hidden reason you're stuck, the truth about your own mind that Carl Jung tried to show the world, and at the end, the exact blueprint for turning all your pent-up ambition into real, lasting change. This is the reward for anyone who doesn't quit halfway, but it only makes sense if you stay to the end, because nothing changes until you see the full picture. And trust me, you haven't heard this put together like this before. We all know the feeling. You see someone online, maybe it's that entrepreneur who started 3 companies while you're still thinking about your first one, or that creator who pumps out content like it's nothing while you struggle to post once a week. And you think, I have just as many ideas, maybe more ambition. Hell, I probably want it more than they do. So why can't I do what they do? You plan, you daydream, you make lists, you watch productivity videos at 2 a.m, telling yourself this Monday will be different. But when it's time to act, when it's time to send that email, make that call, or sit down and actually create something, something invisible holds you back. It's like there's a force field around your potential. You can see it, you can almost touch it, but you can't quite break through. Society has a name for this. They call it laziness. Maybe you've called yourself that 100 times. I'm just not a morning person. I work better under pressure. I'll start when I feel more motivated. But here's what's wild. You're not lazy when it comes to things you actually enjoy. You can binge watch an entire series in a weekend. You can scroll social media for hours without feeling tired. You can research your interests for weeks, absorbing every detail. So what's the difference? Why can you hyper-focus on some things but feel like you're walking through molasses when it comes to your goals? Carl Jung would say laziness is not a personality defect. It's not even about being tired. It's a mask, a convenient label we slap onto something much deeper, something most people never look past the surface to see. Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and what he discovered was this: there's a hidden conflict happening inside your mind. A battle between the part of you that wants to grow and the part of you that wants to stay safe. And for most people, the safety-seeking part wins every single time. That's why you can consume productivity content for hours and still not take action. That's why you can read every self-help book, try every morning routine, download every habit app, and still feel stuck. The world calls it a lack of willpower. Jung calls it something else entirely. And once you see what's really happening, you can never go back to blaming yourself for being lazy again. Jung's entire career was built on one revolutionary idea: that the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge are the very parts controlling our lives. He called it the shadow, the hidden self living under the surface of your conscious mind, pulling the strings while you wonder why you keep making the same choices over and over. Now, here's what most people get wrong about the shadow. They think it's evil. They think it's some dark demon trying to sabotage their success. But Jung knew better. The shadow isn't malicious. It's protective. It's not trying to ruin your life. It's trying to save it. Your shadow contains everything you've learned to hide from the world. Your fears, your doubts, your insecurities, but also your authentic desires that don't fit society's expectations. Most importantly, it holds every memory of pain you experienced when you stepped outside your comfort zone. Remember being laughed at for a wrong answer? Having your creative work dismissed? Being told to be realistic when you shared your dreams? Your shadow remembers all of it, and it's determined to prevent that vulnerability again. Here's the mind-bending part that Jung discovered. The bigger your ambition, the bigger your shadow's resistance becomes. It's not a coincidence that the most talented people often struggle the most with actually using their talents. The shadow does the math. The higher you climb, the farther you can fall. So every time you set a goal, every time you dare to imagine a life beyond the one you're currently living, your shadow feels the threat. Its ancient alarm system starts blaring. Danger, exposure, vulnerability ahead. And then the sabotage begins. But it's not obvious sabotage. That would be too easy to spot. No, the shadow is much more sophisticated than that. Suddenly, You feel tired for no reason. Suddenly, everything else becomes urgent. Your room needs organizing. Your emails need answering. You need to research just one more thing before you can start. You need to plan a little more, prepare a little longer, wait for a better time. Think about the last time you had a really important deadline. How much cleaning did you suddenly feel compelled to do? How many random tasks became absolutely critical? How many quick social media breaks turned into hour-long scrolling sessions? This isn't procrastination as most people understand it. This isn't about time management or discipline. This is your shadow working to protect you from the vulnerability that comes with trying, with caring, with putting yourself out there. Your brain creates brilliant, logical-sounding reasons to delay. I should understand the market better first. I need to lose 10 pounds before dating. I should save more before quitting my job. These thoughts aren't necessarily wrong, but when they become endless loops preventing action, that's shadow work. Jung discovered something that most self-help gurus miss entirely. You cannot out-motivate your shadow. You cannot hype yourself past it. You cannot discipline your way around it. The more pressure you apply from the outside, the more resistance you create on the inside. It's like trying to force a cat into a bath. The harder you push, the more it fights back. And your shadow has been practicing this resistance game your entire life. It knows exactly which buttons to push to keep you stuck. The motivation industry sells you the lie that you just need more discipline, better habits, stronger willpower. But Jung knew that approach was doomed from the start, because motivation operates in your conscious mind, while your shadow runs the unconscious show. You're bringing a knife to a gunfight. Let's map out what actually happens when you try to change without addressing your shadow, so you can see the pattern that keeps almost everyone trapped. It starts with inspiration. Maybe you watch a video, read a book, talk to someone who's living the life you want. Suddenly, you can see it clearly. Your vision, your goal, your transformation. You feel that familiar surge of possibility, that this time will be different energy. You set a big goal, start a business, transform your body, change careers, learn a new skill, write a book. Whatever it is, you go all in. You make plans, you tell friends. You might even start taking action. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you're on fire. But then something shifts. The initial excitement starts to fade. The daily reality of showing up sets in. The gap between where you are and where you want to be feels overwhelming. Doubt creeps in like fog rolling over a hill. Slowly at first, then all at once. The tasks that felt exciting now feel heavy. The morning routine that seemed so doable now feels impossible. The creative project that sparked joy now feels like judgment waiting to happen. And this is where most people think they're failing. But Jung would say this is where the real psychological drama begins. Because this is when your shadow reveals its sophisticated strategy. It doesn't say, don't do this because you're scared. That would be too obvious. Instead, it offers perfectly reasonable alternatives. Wait until you have more time. Learn more first. Start when things settle down. Focus on this other important priority instead. The shadow is a master negotiator. It doesn't ask you to give up. That would trigger your conscious resistance. Instead, it asks you to delay, to modify, to take a step back and reconsider. Just temporary adjustments, it promises, just until conditions are better. But conditions are never better. There's always something else that needs attention first, always another reason to wait. And so the pattern repeats: inspiration, action, resistance, negotiation, delay, disappointment, guilt, and then more inspiration. The cycle that Jung saw in patient after patient, year after year. Here's what's really happening beneath the surface. It's not about motivation, talent, or opportunity. It's not even about time management. It's about the fundamental terror your psyche feels when you start outgrowing the identity it's been protecting. Every meaningful change requires an identity shift. The person who exercises daily isn't the same person who spent evenings on the couch. The entrepreneur isn't the same person who played it safe with traditional employment. The person who speaks their truth isn't the same person who stayed quiet to avoid conflict. Your shadow knows this, and it's genuinely afraid that if you change too much, you'll lose something essential about who you are. Maybe you'll become arrogant. Maybe you'll outgrow your friends. Maybe success will corrupt you. Maybe you'll fail so spectacularly that you'll never recover. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Read that again. How many times have you said, "That's just the way I am," or "I always start things but never finish them," or "I guess I'm just not cut out for success"? How many times have you chalked up your patterns to personality, genetics, or just bad luck? That's your unconscious mind, your shadow, writing the script for your life, and you're calling it personality, genetics, or just how things are. But here's the brutal cost of this unconscious surrender. Every time you choose comfort over courage, you don't just stay the same, you actually contract. Your world gets smaller, your confidence erodes, your sense of possibility shrinks. And every time you shrink, your shadow gets stronger. It collects evidence. "See? I told you this wouldn't work. Good thing I kept you safe." Imagine how much worse you'd feel if you had actually tried and failed publicly. The shadow feeds on disappointment like a vampire feeds on blood. Each abandoned goal, each broken promise to yourself, each moment of giving up becomes fuel for its next intervention. Most people live their entire lives this way, ambitious in their heads, paralyzed in their bodies, dreaming big, playing small, wanting more, settling for less. And the gap between their potential and their reality becomes a source of quiet desperation that they carry everywhere. They blame themselves. They call themselves lazy, undisciplined, weak. They compare themselves to others and wonder what's wrong with them. They try harder, push more, shame themselves into action. But none of it works because they're fighting the wrong battle. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. Fate is not final. It's just the name we give to patterns we don't understand. And once you understand the pattern, once you see the shadow for what it really is, you can begin to work with it instead of against it. This requires asking yourself a question that most people are too afraid to honestly answer. If you are ambitious but rarely take meaningful action, what are you truly scared of? And I mean truly scared of. Not the surface level stuff like, "I'm afraid of failure." Dig deeper. Are you afraid of failing or succeeding and having to live up to new expectations? Are you afraid of others judging you or discovering you're not as special as you hoped? Are you afraid of working hard without results or working hard and getting results you can't handle? Most people avoid this depth because it's uncomfortable. It's easier to blame motivation or circumstances. But Jung knew that real transformation happens in the uncomfortable places we'd rather not explore. The shadow thrives in darkness, in the unconscious parts of your mind where you can't see it clearly. But it loses much of its power when you shine a light on it, when you bring it into conscious awareness. So here's Jung's first prescription for shadow work: radical honesty. Not the kind of honesty where you tell yourself you need to try harder. The kind where you admit what you're actually afraid of, even if it makes you feel pathetic or weak. Try this exercise tonight. Sit somewhere quiet, close your eyes, and imagine you're having a conversation with the part of you that always finds reasons not to start. Don't argue with it or try to convince it to change. Just listen. Ask it, "What are you afraid will happen if I actually follow through this time?" Let whatever comes up come up, even if it sounds ridiculous. Often, the shadow will reveal old wounds you didn't even know were still affecting you. Moments where you were laughed at, criticized, ignored, or rejected. Times when you tried hard and it didn't matter. Experiences that taught you it's safer to dream than to do. Sometimes the fear is about failure. What if I try my best and it's still not good enough? Sometimes it's about success. What if I actually make it and then people expect me to keep performing at that level? Sometimes it's about identity. What if I change so much that I don't recognize myself anymore? This isn't weakness. This isn't pathology. This is just human. These fears made sense when you first developed them. They protected you from real pain. But now they might be protecting you from imaginary threats while keeping you from real opportunities. Jung believed that the shadow doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be integrated. Because within your deepest fears are often your greatest strengths in disguise. The person who's afraid of being too much is probably someone with a lot to offer. The person who's afraid of failure probably cares deeply about doing good work. The person who's afraid of success probably has wisdom about the costs of ambition. The goal isn't to eliminate your fears, but to consciously choose your relationship with them. Instead of letting them run your life from the shadows, you can acknowledge them, thank them for trying to protect you, and then make decisions based on your values rather than your fears. Most people try to overcome their resistance through force. They use shame, guilt, and no excuses mentality. They try to bully themselves into action. But Jung discovered that this approach almost always backfires because you're essentially declaring war on part of yourself. And here's the thing about internal wars. There are no winners. Even if your conscious will temporarily overpowers your shadow, the shadow will eventually find a way to sabotage your progress. It's smarter, more patient, and more creative than your willpower. But what if instead of fighting your shadow, you could befriend it? What if instead of trying to eliminate your resistance, you could understand its wisdom and find ways to honor its concerns while still moving forward? This is the beginning of integration. This is where real change becomes possible. When you stop fighting your shadow and start working with it, something remarkable happens. All that energy you were spending on internal conflict gets freed up for actual progress. You stop wasting mental bandwidth on self-blame and start using it for problem solving. You stop being your own worst enemy and start becoming your own wisest ally. But integration isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing practice. Here's Jung's blueprint for turning shadow awareness into lasting change. Step 1. Name your shadow with surgical precision. Don't just say, "I'm afraid of failure." Get specific. Write down exactly what your shadow is protecting you from. What's the worst-case scenario it's trying to prevent? What story does it tell you about what happens to people who take risks? Maybe it's, "If I start this business and it fails, everyone will see that I'm not as smart as they thought." Or, "If I put my art out there and people don't like it, it means I'm not really talented." Or, "If I succeed, people will expect more from me than I can deliver." The more specific you get, the less power these fears have over you. Vague anxieties feel overwhelming. Specific fears feel manageable. Step 2. Start so small your shadow can't object. Here's where most people go wrong. They try to prove themselves wrong through massive action. They think if they can just force themselves to take huge steps, they'll build momentum and breakthrough. But Jung understood that the shadow responds to sudden changes as threats. The bigger the leap, the stronger the resistance. Instead, start with actions so small that your shadow doesn't even notice them. If you want to write a book, don't commit to writing for 2 hours a day. Commit to writing 1 sentence. If you want to start exercising, don't plan to go to the gym for an hour. Commit to doing 5 push-ups. The goal isn't to accomplish much. It's to establish a new relationship with action. You're proving to your shadow that taking steps forward doesn't have to be dangerous or overwhelming. Every small action sends a signal to your unconscious mind. See? We can do this and survive. We can move forward and stay safe. This gradually rewires the association between action and threat. Step 3. Track your inner weather. Most people live unconsciously. They have no idea what thoughts and feelings are driving their behavior. They drift through days, weeks, even years, then wonder why nothing changes. Jung knew that consciousness is the key to choice. If you're not aware of what's happening inside you, you can't make different decisions. Start tracking your inner experience with the same attention you'd give to any important project. Every evening, spend 5 minutes writing about your day. Not just what you did, but what you felt, what you resisted, what your shadow voice said. Notice patterns. When does your resistance peak? What triggers your avoidance? What stories does your mind tell you right before you give up? What time of day do you feel most courageous? What circumstances make action feel easier? This isn't about judgment or trying to be perfect. It's about developing an intimate understanding of your own psyche so you can work with it more skillfully. Step 4. Find your truth-telling tribe. One of the shadow's favorite tactics is isolation. It wants you to believe you're the only one struggling with these issues. It wants you to feel ashamed of your fears and weaknesses. Because as long as you're alone with your shame, the shadow stays in control. But shame dissolves in the light of honest connection. When you share your real struggles with someone who gets it, something magical happens. You realize you're not broken or uniquely flawed. You're just human. Find at least one person, a friend, a coach, a mentor, or even an online community, who you can be completely honest with about your patterns. Share what you're working on, what you're afraid of, what your shadow tells you. The act of speaking your truth out loud breaks the spell of secrecy. Suddenly, what felt like a shameful personal failing becomes a shared human experience. And in that sharing, you find both courage and accountability. Step 5. Expect setbacks. Never quit the game. Here's what separates people who actually change from people who just try to change. They understand that setbacks aren't failures. They're information. Your shadow is persistent. It's been developing its strategies for years or decades. It's not going to give up just because you've read about Jung and decided to do things differently. Some days, you'll feel all the old resistance return. The fatigue, the excuses, the urgent distractions will all come flooding back. When this happens, don't panic. Don't shame yourself. Don't decide that you're hopeless and give up. Instead, get curious. What triggered this? What was happening in your life when the resistance spiked? What story did your shadow start telling you? What old wound got activated? The goal isn't to never experience resistance. It's to not let resistance have the final word. Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Every time you notice the shadow's voice and choose to take action anyway, even tiny action, you're strengthening your capacity for conscious choice. Every time you return to your practice after a setback, you're building psychological resilience. Step 6. Celebrate integration, not perfection. Traditional self-help tells you to celebrate outcomes, hitting your goals, reaching milestones, achieving visible success. But Jung would say this misses the real victory. The real victory is integration. Moments when you feel the shadow's resistance and choose to move forward anyway. Times when you notice fear arising and respond with compassion instead of criticism. Instances when you take action not because you feel motivated, but because you're committed to your growth. These might seem like small wins, but they're actually the most important kind, because they're building the foundation for everything else. They're creating a new relationship between your conscious mind and your unconscious patterns. Most people wait to celebrate until they've achieved something big and external. But Jung understood that the most profound transformations happen in the quiet moments when we choose differently than we have before. Do this work consistently for 3 weeks. Not perfectly, none of us do anything perfectly, but consistently. Show up to the practice of conscious choice again and again, even when it feels pointless or too slow. Watch what happens. You'll notice the shadow losing its grip on your daily experience. Your lazy days will become rarer. Your confidence will grow, not from external achievements, but from internal trust. You'll start believing that you can rely on yourself to follow through, because you'll have evidence. This isn't theory. This isn't positive thinking. This is how real people with real struggles create real change in their lives. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying the human psyche, and what he discovered was this. Most people live as prisoners of their own unconscious minds. They think they're making choices, but they're really just repeating patterns that were set in motion years or decades ago. But some people, the ones willing to do the hard work of looking inward, of facing their shadows, of choosing consciousness over comfort, these people break free. They stop living someone else's script and start writing their own. They become what Jung called individuated, whole, integrated, authentic. They're not perfect, but they're real. They're not fearless, but they're brave. They don't have it all figured out, but they keep figuring it out. The world needs more people like this. The world needs people who are willing to look at their own stuff, own their own patterns, and do the work of becoming who they really are. Not who their parents wanted them to be, not who society expects them to be, but who they actually are underneath all the conditioning and fear. That person has been waiting inside you your whole life, waiting for you to stop fighting yourself and start integrating yourself, waiting for you to stop calling yourself lazy and start calling yourself human, waiting for you to realize that your sensitivity, your fears, your resistance, all of it, can become the raw material for your transformation. Your shadow will always be there. It's not going anywhere. But it doesn't have to run your life anymore. You can thank it for trying to protect you, acknowledge its concerns, and then make conscious choices about how you want to live. The choice is always yours. The power is always yours. The moment is always now. What will you choose? Your new story starts today.